Elisha is my name. At the time of this story, I was 18 years old. Gad had recruited me for the movement and brought me to Palestine. He had made me into a terrorist. I had met Gad in Paris, where I went straight from Buchenwald immediately after the war. When the Americans liberated Buchenwald, they offered to send me home, but I rejected the offer. I didn't want to relive my childhood, to see our house in foreign hands. I knew that my parents were dead and my native town was occupied by the Russians. What was the use of going back? No thanks, I said. I don't want to go home. Then where do you want to go? I said I didn't know. It didn't really matter. After staying on for 5 weeks in Buchenwald, I was put aboard a train for Paris. France had offered me asylum, and as soon as I reached Paris, a rescue committee sent me for a month to a youth camp in Normandy. When I came back from Normandy, the same organization got me a furnished room on the Rue des Miraux and gave me a grant which covered my living expenses and the cost of the French lessons, which I took every day of the week except Saturday and Sunday, from a gentleman with a mustache whose name I have forgotten. I wanted to master the language sufficiently to sign up for a philosophy course at the Sorbonne. The study of philosophy attracted me because I wanted to understand the meaning of the events of which I had been the victim. In the concentration camp, I had cried out in sorrow and anger against God and also against man, who seemed to have inherited only the cruelty of his creator. I was anxious to reevaluate my revolt in an atmosphere of detachment, to view it in terms of the present. So many questions obsessed me. Where is God to be found? In suffering or in rebellion? When is a man most truly a man? When he submits or when he refuses? Where does suffering lead him? To purification or to bestiality? Philosophy, I hoped, would give me an answer. It would free me from my memories, my doubts, my feeling of guilt. It would drive them away, or at least bring them out in concrete form into the light of day. My purpose was to enroll at the Sorbonne and devote myself to this endeavor. But I did nothing of the sort, and Gad was the one who caused me to abandon my original aim. If today I am only a question mark, he is responsible. One evening there was a knock at my door. I went to open it, wondering who it could be. I had no friends or acquaintances in Paris and spent most of the time in my room, reading a book or sitting with my hand over my eyes, thinking of the past. "I'd like to talk to you." The man who stood in the doorway was young, tall, and slender. Wearing a raincoat, he had the appearance of a detective or an adventurer. "Come in," I said, after he had already entered. He didn't take off his coat. Silently, he walked over to the table, picked up the few books that were there, rifled their pages, and then put them down. Then he turned to me. "I know who you are," he said. "I know everything about you." His face was tanned, expressive. His hair was unruly, one strand perpetually on his forehead. His mouth was hard, almost cruel, thus accentuating the kindness, the intensity, and warm intelligence in his eyes. "You are more fortunate than I, for I know very little about myself." A smile came to his lips. "I didn't come to talk about your past." "The future," I answered, "is of limited interest to me." He continued to smile. "The future?" he asked. "Are you attached to it?" I felt uneasy. I didn't understand him. The meaning of his questions escaped me. Something in him set me on edge. Perhaps it was the advantage of his superior knowledge, for he knew who I was, although I didn't even know his name. He looked at me with such familiarity, such expectation, that for a moment I thought he had mistaken me for someone else, that it wasn't me he had come to see. "Who are you?" I asked. "What do you want with me?" "I'm Gad," he said in a resonant voice, as if he were uttering some Kabbalistic sentence which contained an answer to every question. He said, "I am Gad," in the same way that Jehovah said, "I am that I am." "Very good," I said, with mingled curiosity and fear. "Your name is Gad. Happy to know you. And now that you've introduced yourself, may I ask the purpose of your call? What do you want of me?" His piercing eyes seemed to look straight through me. After several moments of this penetrating stare, he said, in a quite matter-of-fact way, "I want you to give me your future." Having been brought up in the Hasidic tradition, I had heard strange stories about the Meshula, the mysterious messenger of fate to whom nothing is impossible. His voice is such as to make a man tremble, for the message it brings is more powerful than either the bearer or the recipient. His every word seems to come from the absolute, the infinite, and its significance is at the same time fearful and fascinating. Gad is a Mashula, I said to myself. It was not his physical appearance that gave me this impression, but rather what he said and the way he said it. Who are you? I asked again in terror. Something told me that at the end of the road we were to travel together, I should find another man very much like myself, whom I should hate. I am a messenger, he said. I felt myself go pale. My premonition was correct. He was a messenger, a man sent by fate to whom I could refuse nothing. I must sacrifice everything to him, even hope, if he asked it. You want my future? I asked. What will you do with it? He smiled again, but in a cold, distant manner, as one who possesses a power over men. I'll make it into an outcry, he said, and there was a strange light in his dark eyes. An outcry first of despair and then of hope, and finally a shout of triumph. I sat down on my bed, offering him the only chair in the room, but he remained standing. In the Hasidic legends, the messenger is always portrayed standing, as if his body must at all times serve as a connecting link between heaven and earth. Standing thus, in a trench coat which seemed as if it had never been taken off, and were an integral part of his body, with his head inclined toward his right shoulder and a fiery expression in his eyes, he proceeded to tell me about the movement. He smoked incessantly, but even when he paused to light a cigarette, he continued to stare obliquely at me and never stopped talking. He talked until dawn, and I listened with my eyes and my mind wide open. Just so I had listened as a child to the grizzled master who revealed to me the mysterious universe of the Kabbalah, where every idea is a story, and every story, even one concerned with the life of a ghost, is a spark from eternity. That night, Gad told me about Palestine and the age-old Jewish dream of recreating an independent homeland, one where every human act would be free. He told me also of the movement's desperate struggle with the English. The English government has sent 100,000 soldiers to maintain so-called order. We of the movement are no more than 100 strong, but we strike fear into their hearts. Do you understand what I'm saying? We cause the English, yes, the English, to tremble. The sparks in his dark eyes lit up the fear of 100,000 uniformed men. This was the first story I had ever heard in which the Jews were not the ones to be afraid. Until this moment, I had believed that the mission of the Jews was to represent the trembling of history rather than the wind which made it tremble. The paratroopers, the police dogs, the tanks, the planes, the Tommy guns, the executioners, they are all afraid. The Holy Land has become, for them, a land of fear. They don't dare walk out on the streets at night or look a young girl in the eye for fear that she may shoot them in the belly, or stroke the head of a child for fear that he may throw a hand grenade in their face. They dare neither to speak nor to be silent. They are afraid. Hour after hour, Gad spoke to me of the blue nights of Palestine, of their calm and serene beauty. You walk out in the evening with a woman, you tell her that she is beautiful and you love her, and 20 centuries hear what you are saying. But for the English, the night holds no beauty. For them, every night opens and shuts like a tomb. Every night, 2, 3, a dozen soldiers are swallowed up by the darkness and never seen again. Then Gad told me that the part that he expected me to play. I was to give up everything and go with him to join the struggle. The movement needed fresh recruits and reinforcements. It needed young men who were willing to offer it their futures. The sum of their futures would be the freedom of Israel, the future of Palestine. It was the first time that I had heard of any of these things. My parents had not been Zionists. To me, Zion was a sacred ideal, a messianic hope, a prayer, a heartbeat, but not a place on the map or a political slogan, a cause for which men killed and died. Gad's stories were utterly fascinating. I saw in him a prince of Jewish history, a legendary messenger sent by fate to awaken my imagination, to tell the people whose past was now their religion. Come, come. The future is waiting for you with open arms. From now on, you will no longer be humiliated, persecuted, or even pitied. You will not be strangers, encamped in an age and in a place that are not yours. Come, brothers, come. Gad stopped talking and went to look out the window at the approaching dawn. The shadows melted away, and a pale, prematurely weary light, the color of stagnant water, invaded my small room. I accept your offer, I said. I said it so softly that Gad seemed not to hear. He remained standing by the window, and after a moment of silence turned around to say, "Here is the dawn. In our land, it is very different. Here, the dawn is gray. In Palestine, it is red like fire." "I accept, Gad," I repeated. "I heard you," he said with a smile, the color of the Paris dawn. "You'll be leaving in 3 weeks." The autumn breeze blowing in through the window made me shiver. 3 weeks, I reflected, before I plunged into the unknown. Perhaps my shiver was caused not so much by the breeze as by this reflection. I believe that even then, unconsciously, I knew that at the end of the road I was to travel with Gad, a man was waiting. A man who would be called upon to kill another man. Myself. Radio journalism, last-minute news flashes. David Ben Moshe's execution will take place at dawn tomorrow. The High Commissioner has issued an appeal for calm. Curfew at 9 o'clock. No one will be allowed on the streets. I repeat, no one will be allowed on the streets. The army has orders to shoot on sight. The announcer's voice betrayed his emotion. As he said the name David Ben Moshe, there must have been tears in his eyes. All over the world, the young Jewish fighter was the hero of the day. All the wartime resistance movements of Europe held rallies in front of the British embassies. The chief rabbis of the capital cities sent a joint petition to His Majesty the King. Their telegram with some 30 signatures at the bottom ran, "Do not hang a young man whose only crime is fidelity to his ideal." A Jewish delegation was received at the White House, and the president promised to intercede. That day, the heart of humanity was one with that of David Ben Moshe. It was 8 o'clock in the evening and completely dark. Gad switched on the light. Outside, the child was still crying. "The dirty dogs," said Gad. "They're going to hang him." His face and hands were red and perspiring. He paced up and down the room, lighting one cigarette after another, only to throw each one away. "They're going to hang him," he repeated. "The bastards." The news broadcast came to an end, and a program of choral singing followed. I started to turn off the radio, but Gad held me back. "It's 8:15, he said. "See if you can get our station." I was too nervous to turn the dial. "I'll find it," said Gad. The broadcast had just begun. The announcer was a girl with a resonant, grave voice familiar to every one of us. Every evening at this hour, men, women, and children paused in their work or play to listen to the vibrant, mysterious voice, which always began with the same 8 words. "You are listening to the voice of freedom." The Jews of Palestine loved this girl, or young woman, without knowing who she was. The English would have given anything to lay hands upon her. In their eyes, she was as dangerous as the old man. She, too, was a part of the legend. Only a very few people, no more than 5, knew her identity, and Gad and I were among them. Her name was Ilana. She and Gad were in love, and I was a friend to both of them. Their love was an essential part of my life. I needed to know that there was such a thing as love, and that it brought smiles and joy in its wake. "You are listening to the voice of freedom," Ilana repeated. Gad's dark face quivered. He was bent almost double over the radio as if he wanted to touch with his hands and eyes the clear, deeply moving voice of Ilana, which tonight was his voice and mine and that of the whole country. "2 men are preparing to meet death at dawn tomorrow," said Ilana, as if she were reading a passage from the Bible. "One of them deserves our admiration, the other our pity. Our brother and guide, David Ben Moshe, knows why he is dying. John Dawson does not know. Both of them are vigorous and intelligent, on the threshold of life and happiness. They might have been friends, but now this can never be. At dawn tomorrow, at the same hour, the same minute, they will die. But not together, for there is an abyss between them. David Ben Moshe's death is meaningful. John Dawson's is not. David is a hero. John is a victim." For 20 minutes, Ilana went on talking. The last part of her broadcast was dedicated exclusively to John Dawson because he had the greater need of comfort and consolation. I knew neither David nor John, but I felt bound to them and their fates. It flashed across my mind that in speaking of John Dawson's imminent death, Ilana was speaking of me also, since I was his killer. Who was to kill David Ben Moshe? For a moment I had the impression that I was to kill both of them, and all the other Johns and Davids on earth, that I was the executioner, and I was 18 years old. 18 years of searching and suffering. of study and rebellion, and they all added up to this. I wanted to understand the pure, unadulterated essence of human nature, the path of the understanding of man. I had sought after the truth, and here I was about to become a killer, a participant in the work of death and God. I went over to the mirror hanging on the wall and looked in my face. I almost cried out, for everywhere I saw my own eyes. As a child, I was afraid of death. I was not afraid to die, but every time I thought of death, I shuddered. Death, Kalman, the grizzled master, told me, is a being without arms or legs or mouth or head. It is all eyes. If ever you meet a creature with eyes everywhere, you can be sure that it is death. Gad was still leaning over the radio. Look at me, I said, but he did not hear. John Dawson, you have a mother, Ilana was saying. At this hour she must be crying, or eating her heart out in silent despair. She will not go to bed tonight. She will sit in the chair near the window, watch in hand, waiting for dawn. Her heart will skip a beat when yours stops beating forever. They've killed my son, she will say, those murderers. But we are not murderers, Mrs. Dawson. Look at me, Gad, I repeated. He raised his eyes, shot me a glance, shrugged his shoulders, and went back to the voice of Ilana. Gad doesn't know that I am death, I thought to myself. But John Dawson's mother, sitting near the window of her London flat, must surely know. She's gazing out into the night, and the night has 1,000 eyes, which are mine. No, Mrs. Dawson, we are not murderers. Your cabinet ministers are murderers. They are responsible for the death of your son. We should have preferred to receive him as a brother, to offer him bread and milk and show him the beauties of our country. But your government made him our enemy, and by the same token signed his death warrant. No, we are not murderers. I buried my head in my hands. The child outside had stopped crying.